Hi, and welcome to the Skeptical Leftist Podcast, the show where I talk to a variety of people to spread critical thinking, progressive politics, and left-wing philosophy. And today I'm joined by Simon Enoch. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Corey.
So I guess always got to start the same. Who are you, and what do you do?
I am a senior researcher with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, which is a progressive think tank that has been operating in Canada since 1980.
Okay. And so that I guess that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about was the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. I met you briefly at an event where Heat Jeer and Nora Loretto were speaking here in Regina. And so I guess, what is the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives?
Well, as I said, it's an independent progressive think tank. So, it approaches policy from a position. Like we don't claim to be neutral or impartial. We believe in democracy. We believe in environmental sustainability. We believe in economic equality and things like that. So we're going to approach policy from that perspective. The reason that the center was created in the first place was in the 1970s with the sort of rise of neoliberalism. You had corporate Canada bankrolling a litany of, for lack of a better word, corporate funded think tanks, things like the Fraser Institute, a whole slew of other organizations would emerge at that time. The C.D. Howe Institute became much more conservative. Things like the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, things like that, all came out to push the neoliberal agenda. And there really wasn't anything equivalent on the left side of the spectrum that could sort of come out and sort of say, like, well, you know what, there are alternatives. We don't have to sort of, follow the neoliberal model. We don't have to gut public services. We don't have to gut worker rights. We don't have to, sell off state-owned assets and things like that in fire sales. So the center really was created in 1980 after this sort of wave of corporate-funded think tanks that emerged in the 1970s and really start to dominate the public debate. And so it was, labor activists, academics, civil society actors, sort of felt, we need an equivalent policy institute on the left. And so that's why the center was created.
It makes sense. It's unfortunate that neoliberalism and kind of like that right-wing economic view has kind of become like it was the mainstream and is the mainstream, right?
Yeah, pretty much, dominated. As Thatcher said, there is no alternative for about 30 years. I think we're starting to see cracks in the armor, and whether there's something better that might replace it is an open question, but at least it certainly seems like neoliberalism isn't as immune to criticism as it perhaps used to be.
Yeah, the I guess current like right wing kind of take on it is almost more bizarre than anything, but it's like the neoliberalism has become the centrist perspective, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah, that's a really good point. In a lot of ways, certain aspects of the right, the alt-right, have picked up the left-wing critique of neoliberalism, right? When you look at the sort of arguments that people were making in the 1990s about, these massive trade deals that, gave capital and investors rights and sovereignty over workers and things like that. That was what people were marching in the streets in Seattle and Quebec City and things like that. Unfortunately, the alt-right seems to get its targets wrong, like the World Economic Forum, not the World Trade Organization. But nevertheless, the critique is kind of the same, right? That, these sort of organizations are running roughshod over national sovereignty and things like that. I don't know if we should be flattered. They stole our critique.
Yeah, they well, because they end up, like you say, they're pointing it at the wrong people, right? Or
Mhm.
wrong organizations, even, like where like the IMF is essentially like stealing the sovereignty in the name of American interests, like, and in many ways America runs roughshod over trade globally. Like they still seem to think that like this like nationalist protectionism seems to be the
Mhm.
answer, which is very, I don't know, seems backwards to me.
Yeah, it is interesting that they pick like organizations that don't have any real power, like the United Nations. People get
Right.
busy about that, like Agenda 21 or things like that, or the World Economic Forum, which isn't really doesn't have any actual power. Certainly, a lot of very powerful figures walk through its halls. So I'm not saying it's completely without influence, but
Right.
in the hierarchy of global organizations that actually exercise power. These are not the ones I would be looking at.
Yeah, and especially with the extreme power of like the corporation right now, where like corporations in many ways are way more powerful than governments, and they span worldwide when versus staying in one region. So it's like, how do you justify not tackling capital in that sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we could sit here all day and talk about the shortcomings of conservative analysis in regards to where power
Yeah,
lies. Ultimately,
yeah, for sure. I guess so in some ways I'm curious about the Canadian Center for Policy Alternatives. Like what exactly does a think tank do, I guess, is kind of the idea.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, gosh, we run the gamut of you name it, we've probably published something on it, and ultimately, right? I mean, I'll be honest. In a way, it's sort of you're waging an ideological war.
Right.
Whose ideas win. As Milton Friedman famously said, when a crisis comes, elites or people in power will pick up the ideas that are laying around.
Yeah.
Um, and so, in a way, like I said, in the '70s, when you had and subsequently for decades after that, with the dominant sort of thinking and the dominant sort of policy ideas were neoliberal. Um, we're trying to just make a space where at least there are some options, there are some alternatives, for lack of a better
Yeah, we
joke.
want our
Um,
ideas to be the ones
yeah,
that they can pick up, eh?
yeah, and that's not to say, of course, that our ideas are vetted. They're empirically supported and evidence based. Yes,
Of
of
course.
course they
Yeah.
are. But once again, like I said, we come at policy from a certain perspective, and the questions you ask and will sort of um, tailor the responses you get a lot of the times, right? Like if the Fraser Institute is looking at, you know, this program, does it make money
Right.
versus us? We would ask, this program, does it serve the public interest? Does it, we're asking fundamentally different questions. So we're going to come to
Yeah.
fundamentally different conclusions because of those questions, right? Um, so once again, I'm certainly not trying to say that our analysis isn't sound, and we don't. We try to make everything evidence based, but it is a war of ideas, right? And hopefully, if you want a certain kinds of society and want certain kind of policies to be adopted, you have to make them popular. You have to make them, or at least they have to be out there in the
Yeah.
universe, right? For people to sort of to decide whether or not that's the way to go. So ultimately, I think that's what we're trying to do: carve out a space where there are policies that would have progressive outcomes that don't solely serve the interests of the powerful and the wealthy. And yeah.
Yeah, I think I mean we've seen that quite a bit, right? Since in the Scott Moe government, the Saskatchewan Party government, like even like you say, the bus services, like they looked at it as though it was a profit or it needed to be a profit driven industry or project, when it should be about whether, well, to
Yeah.
me, it should be about whether or not it serves the people of the province.
Yeah, I mean, it was an $80 million subsidy, and the impact of that we know has been to isolate seniors in rural communities, prevent people from getting to health appointments, prevent certain drugs from getting to rural communities in a quick fashion. I mean, the sort of social impacts of the privatization of the Saskatchewan Transportation Corporation are immense, but they weren't ever considered, as you
Yeah.
say, right? It was, oh, the market will fill it, and yeah, we have a private bus service that runs between the major centers, but they're not in any way, servicing rural Saskatchewan. I mean, effectively, if you don't own a car in rural Saskatchewan, you're stranded.
Yeah, no, you used to be able to, like, there was a bus stop in or bus station in pretty much every town that you could go to. So if you knew someone, there, you could go visit them or they could come visit you easy enough, or you could ship like things quickly.
Anything in a day, like it'd get there later in the day.
Yeah. And now that utility is just like it was not ever a consideration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, but I think it's important to, because people, when they see think tanks and they're like, well, aren't they biased? I prefer to say, what questions are you asking?
Yeah, no,
And
that makes sense.
as we've just shown, right? I mean, if you looked at STC from a purely financial perspective, you can see as well we're losing money. It's not taxpayers are losing money. But if you look at it from the other side, the social impact side, you'd say, well, maybe $80 million a year for an entire government budget to ensure people aren't isolated and that elderly people get their drugs and get to good health outcomes and aren't stranded. Maybe that's a good return on investment. All depends on how you view the question.
Yeah, and I think we see that too. Like you have like not just right wing governments, but like even liberal governments, like which I guess to me is kind of right wing, but I know they get labeled as the left. But like so liberal governments, conservatives, they like to target like the profitability of like even the Canada Post, right?
Yeah, that I was going to say, like that's where you're seeing that argument today, right?
Yeah, like they it's not I don't think it should need to worry about being profitable because that's a pretty important service. But
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and the fact that no business could do it profitably shows you that it's essential service. You can't
yeah,
deliver. Canada is a huge country, sparsely populated, all over the place. There's no sort of there's no profit in delivering to northern Saskatchewan,
yeah,
right?
the letter
Major centers,
service.
and even the big companies like FedEx and and whatnot, they all rely on Canada Post for that last mile service
Yeah,
to
yeah,
those remote communities. So it just goes to show you, right? Like you adopt that sort of cold calculus of, is this making money or is this not making money? I think you find yourself making some pretty harsh decisions that neglects the kind of social consequences.
yeah. It's interesting because they always seem to notice that when like in December there where there was the Canada Post strike right around Christmas time, and on the news the media would often talk about like uh like the impacts of the labor strike, like all these people can't get their medicine because they're up in the middle of the nowhere and the only thing that does it
Mm.
delivers it is Canada Post. But that question isn't framed the same way when you're talking about the profitability of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's only a problem, when there's a labor dispute.
Yeah.
But yeah, and those problems aren't usually raised when they talk about selling it off or privatizing it or things like that. And I guarantee you privatize Canada Post, no profit-seeking company in their right mind is going to say, "Well, we'll deliver to those communities without a massive government subsidy."
Yeah, that's right. And then, or yeah, either people are going to end up traveling to go get their mail, or
Yeah,
they're going to be, or they're going to just not get it, or what,
yeah.
or the
I mean,
government will end up funding it too,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
And that's usually the effect of privatization, right? You push the cost onto the individual.
Yeah.
Or you end up subsidizing, like, you can either lose money on a public, service like Canada Post, or you can subsidize a private corporation and their profits. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day,
Take the money out of the
I prefer the
pockets anyway.
former, right?
Yeah, that's right. Like this government still ends up paying for
Exactly.
it. So, yeah. So, I guess there are there other like progressive policy or think tanks in Canada. Like I seem to recall the Broadband Institute
Yeah,
exists.
yeah. I mean, there's a handful, and I think everyone has tried to carve out a niche. Broadband is less research focused and more, I think, advocacy focused.
Okay.
They run like Press Progress and things like that, if I'm correct in my so
Right.
they really push sort of issues in social media and and public education and things like that. Whereas we're much more research focused. We promote our stuff, but I think Broadband, particularly through Press Progress and stuff like that, has shown has really set the bar high for how you can promote those ideas. And then there's a slew of sort of more single issue, things that are concerned with like childcare or poverty or
Right.
things like that. But I'd say we're the sort of jack of all trades. We like, as I said, we run the gamut. We've published on virtually everything. But yeah, we're one of a very small few.
Yeah, there's not a lot, that's for sure. And I mean, I didn't really know about the CCPA until this event with Nora Loretto and Heat Gear came up in the summer, just before the summer, and it seems like too often like the progressive version or progressive think tanks often get missed or fly under the radar, where everybody knows about the Fraser Institute, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, you're fighting an uphill battle, right? Because as I said, a lot of these more right wing think tanks have extensive sponsorship and funding by corporations.
Yeah.
The Fraser Institute, takes tobacco money and oil money and you name it. Whereas we are funded primarily through a network of individual supporters.
Right.
We also take trade union money, of course. We were created as part of the by labor activists and things like that. So yeah, we're not as well resourced as the right, but I mean, given given what we're up against, I think we punch well above our weight. I'd like to be more prominent, but it's a tough slog, right?
It
out
is.
There. We've got a fantastic communications team that gets our issues out, but it's difficult to get above the noise sometimes, particularly when you've got every other think tank on the other side saying the complete opposite of what we say, right? So
yeah, and then they get the mainstream coverage, and progressive ideas tend to not.
Yeah. And governments tend to really run with their stuff, particularly conservative governments, right? Like Mo loves to tout the fact that the Fraser Institute says that Saskatchewan is the best place for mining investment. What he doesn't say is that's because we have ridiculously low royalty rates and virtually no environmental regulations. But
yeah, it's amazing. Just forget that part. That's irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, governments like to tout think tanks when the results of their research correspond with what they want to do, right? So if you're on the left, then there's not very many left wing governments. There's not as much utility in the stuff that we put out for politicians, at least.
That's right. I'm curious. Do you have like politicians that you contact with your like press releases and research projects and whatnot? Like, do you put this in front of a certain group of people?
I mean, certainly, we always want to have the ear of policymakers. I'm not sure to what extent we directly try and communicate to politicians. there's a bunch of CRA stuff that obviously we can't advocate for any partisan
Right.
position, right? But we can advocate for policy and for certain policies and for and against other policies, right? But certainly, politicians will pick up our stuff. I think we had a tremendous success in shaping the childcare debate during the Trudeau years.
Right.
As to bringing in that sort of universal childcare system, and to this day, I think we've accumulated a sort of database and a bunch of sort of statistics and data showing where there needs to be improvement on implementing $10 a day daycare and where there needs to be more spots created and things like that. So that's the kind of influence that I'm really proud of, where we see policies directly affected by some of the research and some of the commentary that we put forward. And I'd say on the childcare file, we were very influential.
Right on. No, and I mean, I know like that's a big deal. Even the Saskatchewan government that like actively publicly hated the Trudeau government had to concede that this was a policy that would benefit the citizens and like had to go forward with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the evidence is pretty overwhelming. It's kind of a no-brainer, and certainly the other thing is we had Quebec doing it for so long that the sort of evidence coming out of there is in regards to female workplace or workforce participation, developmental outcomes for children, things like that. Like we had a bountiful evidence to make the argument that this is a program that should be taken nationally all across the country. And to their credit, the Saskatchewan Party government agreed. Let's hope they still agree and sign the actual continuation of the deal.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, I guess.
I guess we will.
Yeah, so I guess I wanted to go through a couple of your articles. You have one that's quite recent, talking about Saskatchewan as the second lowest minimum wage in Canada. And I guess on October 1st, we're going to bump up to $15.35.
Yes.
So I guess, how does it feel to be in the second lowest minimum wage province?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's cause for celebration. I mean, at least we're out of the basement, right? We were in the basement of Alberta, both at $15 an hour. So this little bump that we get on October 1st will take us to second place. I mean, what I try and show in the article, which is very short, is just and this is something we've been sort of banging on about for years, is how inadequate the minimum wage is, right?
Right.
I mean, just from any sort of metric. In particular, we sort of used, the rental wage. What does it cost to rent an apartment, a one-bedroom apartment in Saskatoon or Regina? Or the living wage, which is a much more detailed sort of calculation of what it costs to live in Saskatchewan.
Right.
I mean, all of those calculations show that you need like in the neighborhood of $18 to $19 an hour to make to have a dignified standard of living. And of course, $15.35 is not it. It's not going to get us there. And, what I would say to sort of people that say, well, that's ridiculous. You can't go to $18, $19 an hour. We as a society will pay for low income, for a low minimum wage. Like you pay for it through housing subsidies, through food banks, through other sort of economic supports. If you're not making enough money, you're going to have to go other places for help. So it's not like our hands are sort of free, right? When we live in a low wage economy, there are consequences for it, and there are costs to it. Not to mention costs for if people are sort of food insecure or not getting the nutrition or not being able to afford like prescription drugs because they just can't afford it, right? Like there's a whole host of knock-on effects of having a low minimum wage economy that we as society pay for. Once again, these are the questions I think you need to ask when you're looking at something like the minimum wage, not just from an employer's perspective, but from a societal perspective, and what kind of society you want to live in. So that's that's sort of the argument, is that minimum wage is already inadequate. Thanks for the 35 cents, but that's not going to get it done. And I really wish that I hope that people think about what it costs. Well, I'm sure people are thinking about what it costs, because the rate of inflation that we've experienced over the past 2 years. So, ask yourself if a 35-cent increase in your wage would go anywhere to compensating you for the cost of inflation over the past couple of years. I think we could all agree that.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't cut it. I find it so strange that people still bring up this argument that any amount of wage, any wage to me is enough, right? While we have rising cost of housing, rising food costs, while corporations are raking in increasing profits all the time, and you've got well, if there's no cap on rent, then how can there be a cap on wage, right? How can you ever say how can you separate the housing crisis that everybody's talking about, that the federal government is now putting money into developing new housing to alleviate, and how do you separate that from the wage that we're making as workers? It's absurd.
Yeah.
I don't know how people separate the two. It seems I don't know. I do okay because I work in the oil industry. And I often talk to the guys that I work with, and I'll bring it up to them and I'll say how do you think somebody who's working on making minimum wage survives? And nobody can figure it out. Because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But
no, and it's a growing problem, as we all know. And minimum wage isn't a silver bullet by any measure.
Right.
It can help, but as you sort of say, right? Cost of housing, you can't have sort of if you raise the minimum wage and then if landlords are just oh, everyone got a raise, so I can raise my rent, then it just completely cancels it out. So you have to have some form of rent control or rent stabilization to ensure that those essential costs aren't also rising as your wage is rising.
I got in a little bit of shit this week because I posted about Carney's new plan to increase affordable housing by increasing the funding for developers and funneling this money into developers' hands. and I'm critical of a move like this because it just feels like we're going to end up with expensive condos that nobody can afford. And now the money that used to be in the public hands that could have gone to directly building is instead in private hands.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we sort of saw the same thing work out in Saskatchewan. When I first came here in 2009, also in the midst of I lived here before, but I came back in 2009. Just want to get my Saskatchewan native credentials. Right. But I came back, and you remember at that time, it was the Saskatoon, and we had crazy low vacancies.
Right.
In Regina and Saskatoon, and all these questions about affordability were very front and center. And the government came out with a housing plan, which was exactly what you were sort of alluding to, just market incentives, right? We're gonna make it so developers will develop. And what did they do? They built luxury condos. That's not market accessible or affordable housing. So it doesn't matter if the supply of luxury condos is through the roof. That's not going to help people that can't afford them.
That's right.
So I totally get what you're saying, and you need to actually start getting back into the practice of building housing that the government owns and can ensure and can control the rents and things like that. I just don't see any other way of ensuring affordability going forward, because as we've seen, allowing the market to run roughshod, is not helping affordability at all.
Yeah, I guess it's the liberal order, right? Like they always believe in, and I mean, Carney is a banker,
Mhm.
so he's always going to lean to these market forces type arguments, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt that he's a firm believer in the market. You can't be a central banker
Yeah, that's
having,
right.
having some faith in the market. Yeah.
No, it's pretty strange to me. Yeah, I don't know. Not my favorite. Not my favorite policy idea. I know. Yeah, I got a few. I guess what you might call liberal supporters who did not appreciate my criticism of the policy and the potential what I see as the potential fallout from it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'd really like to see, the kind of affordable housing policy that they have in Austria, like in Vienna. I
Right?
don't know if your listeners want to take a look at like some absolutely spectacular affordable, like it doesn't have, I think when people think of affordable, below market rate housing, they think of like, clapboard, put
Right.
up shoddy things. I think to a large extent, we have sort of tried to create cheap, inexpensive housing that doesn't last. Vienna, I mean, the sort of these beautiful apartments with just amazing communal spaces with lots of public leisure, pools, parks, a real sort of, architecturally designed to sort of create community and foster, democracy, for lack of a better word, because you're constantly in contact with your neighbors, and things like that. And there's no reason why we couldn't do the same thing.
Yeah. No, that's right. Just it takes a little bit of like actual planning and
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
it's just you just
Planning
don't.
isn't a bad thing.
No, that's right. Like just think about what you're gonna do before you do it. Yeah. So let's see. Where was I? The other one that kind of stood out to me was an article you wrote for, back in June. I didn't really get into it yet too much, but the title is "Before the Far Right Threatened Democracy, Neoliberalism Stripped It Down." And
Mhm.
I'm curious. I know it's been a while since you wrote the article, but if you can remember what your argument is in this article, I'm quite interested in it.
Okay, I'll try and remember. Um, I mean, I think the argument there was that one of the ways that the only way that neoliberalism can really work, because it tends to become so unpopular so quickly, because it it decimates public services, it erodes workers' rights, it privatizes state assets, it cut taxes for the rich, things like that. Is you have to kind of circumscribe democracy at the same time. And what I mean by that is you have to sort of constrain the ability of the people to affect economic policy. You have to kind of ring fence economic policy. And you can see this in the way central banks are now, independent, right?
Yeah.
We can't really influence them. You can see that in sort of balanced budget legislation, where you have to balance the budget regardless of if you're in like an emergency or things like that. Um, and you could see it in other sort of policies where it's really designed to sort of ensure that the public has no say
Right.
in certain economic policies, um, and that's the way it's been able to fix itself and not be rolled back. Right, because that was always the fear of the early neoliberal theorists, where yeah, we can implement these reforms, these neoliberal reforms, but the people aren't going to like it. They're going to want to get rid of it. Right. That's one of the reasons why people like Friedman and Hayek loved Pinochet.
Right.
Right. Like
Right.
ultimately, neoliberals tend to be authoritarians because they like that idea.
Yeah.
Democracy shouldn't be to extend into the economic realm. Versus a socialist who would be like, no, that's exactly where democracy should be, in the economic.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, part of the neoliberal project is ensuring that it couldn't be rolled back by ensuring that democracy can't get into those sort of nooks and crannies of economic policy that is sort of shut off from public influence. So I believe that's the argument I was making there, or at least that was the premise of it. And I think what I was sort of arguing for was, a robust return to economic democracy. it used to be part of social democracy. Used to be that just like it's legitimate for us as citizens to have influence in the political realm, we should also have influence in the economic realm, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's what a trade union is. A trade union is, a sphere of democracy within the economic sphere, right? Allows workers to have some control over their workplace, their working conditions, obviously their rates of pay, their compensation, their benefits, but how the work is done, how they're treated on the job. These are, they shouldn't be controversial.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you say like, oh, well, a trade union is a democratic space in the workplace, people kind of like shake their head. But,
Right.
that's a truism if you think about it. So ultimately, yeah, I think that's what I argued and sort of lamented the fact that, social democracy as practiced today by, I don't even know if it is practiced today, by, the NDP,
Right.
doesn't seem to go there anymore, right? Like it tends to be more, and it's in no way sort of a criticism. Like it tends to be more focused on social issues, and those are important,
Of
but
course. Yeah.
tends to shy away from economic issues. Tends to be unfortunately a lot too much alike to other parties. Like what's the difference? Right. Ultimately, if everyone's talking about tax cuts, if everyone's talking about, the same sort of economic policies, the only real place where there's difference is in social policy. And, I think
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why, right wing populism has been, so popular.
Yeah.
They're not afraid to talk about economic policy, and even if some of their ideas are completely off the wall, right, like tariffs and
Right.
things like
Right.
that, but they at least put them forward as, we recognize that you have economic grievances, we recognize that you're not getting ahead, we recognize that you have economic anxiety, here's a bunch of policies, none of them will work, but at least we understand your economic anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I don't, either the liberals or the social democrats, to the extent they are still social democrats, really addressing those questions.
Yeah, I said that actually, like when I was predicting a Polyev government before the
Mm-hmm.
last election. That's what I was saying is like it seems like the only one who's actually saying that the economy sucks is the right wing, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't like their solutions at all. Like I don't like the way they look at it at all. But I think it's fully fair for people to criticize a liberal government that's in power if the economy isn't serving us as
Mm-hmm.
citizens, right? And like, yeah, I got get into a lot of arguments online with people over that stuff, but it seems like this is a growing trend that I see among uh like pundits, writers, think tanks, various journalists. The idea that economic democracy is something we ought to desire and would give us a better result for everyone. Uh, like I recently talked to Osita Winevu from down in the U.S. and Matt McManus, who wrote the book Liberal Socialism. Like this is not a
Love Matt
yeah
McManus. Just
yeah
got to give a
he's a
shout out.
brilliant guy. Yeah.
One of the best political theorists working right now, and really proud that he's Canadian.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I it's just I find like and maybe it's my algorithm bias because I see socialists all over. That's what I'm looking at. But I feel like there is like and not to keep talking on and on and on about my about things, but like there was a recent Gallup poll in the US where socialism as a concept has gained favorability among young people in the United States. And I think
Mhm.
that there's a lot to be said for that economic democracy concept.
Yeah, I mean, and I know, I think this was one of the pitfalls of the Democrats is during the election or when Trump won, because the Biden administration had all these numbers saying, well, everything looks fine, right? But some of those stats, they cannot, even if everything is, GDP numbers look good or the
Yeah.
stock market look good, like what does it look on the ground? And it can't really capture that economic anxiety, which I think everybody has right now. We've seen
Right.
unprecedented inflation. The world seems to be like, completely out of control. You've got worsening climate crisis. Um, Food prices are only going to get worse, right? Particularly once we get into cycles of, volatility in food and crop yields, which we
Yep.
will because of change. But all this stuff is baked in, and I think people have maybe they can't articulate it, but they feel it. And it's that economic uncertainty that I think the right has successfully tapped into. And as we said, they have no solutions that aren't sort of beating up on the vulnerable and amongst us. But at least they're putting forward solutions and recognizing and acknowledging that anxiety. And we aren't, or at least we're not taking it. We don't see the urgency and putting forward like real, I think, bold solutions. I think we're just nibbling around the edges about affordability. Like the gas tax. Yeah, that could help, I guess, a couple cents off gas. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's not it's not a solution to affordability. So yeah, I mean, I have my
for sure.
criticism of how we're these issues.
No, I mean, it's just one of these things that I think too often, like not just the parties that are in government, but also the parties around them, they often get stuck in like a kind of a status quo kind of bias, right? And like, I don't know, somehow, and this is not me applauding the far right. Somehow the right has come out of that status quo bias in so much that they can at least criticize what's happening and complain about it. Where like your more center or center left parties aren't breaking out of that status quo.
Yeah, I would agree, right? Like, I think because the Social Democratic parties were sort of invited into the consensus in the 50s and 60s, they're playing the same kind of political game that the mainstream parties are, right? Which is try not to rock the boat. Don't try to be everything to everybody. Don't make any enemies. Cautious incrementalism, nothing visionary or bold. As you have all this underlying seething sort of anxiety about the crisis we're in, and the right, particularly the alt-right and the far right, has, I think, as you said, sort of acknowledged and recognized that this is a tremendous organizing moment and opportunity, and have tapped into that. Whereas all of the other sort of parties, they make half measures at it sometimes, but it doesn't seem genuine, it doesn't seem authentic, and it doesn't seem to meet the moment of where people are, right? And so I think that's why you're just seeing this kind of flailing.
Yeah, no, I got it. I agree for sure. It's I guess as anything that is in the current political moment, it's a little bit frustrating, I guess.
Yes.
But I guess we're coming up on roughly 45 minutes here for the show, and I'm curious if there's anything that I haven't asked you about the CCPA that is maybe pretty important that needs to come out.
Other than we need people's support, right? As I said,
you need support. Yeah,
we're primarily a supporter. We're primarily over 10,000 Canadians are supporters of us. As I said, we're kind of the only game in town, at least in regards to our reach and our scope. And if we're not there, then as I said, the debate will be dominated by your Fraser Institutes, your CD House, your Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and the perspectives of workers, of students, of other people might not be taken into account. So I think we are an important part of having a robust and civil debate on these issues. And as I said, we're under resourced. We can't rely on tobacco money. We can't rely on big oil companies funding our research because we tend to come to conclusions they don't like. So we rely on the collective power of the people. So if you are interested in sort of checking us out, go to policyalternatives.ca, and you can see the breadth of our research. Always free. We never charge for it. I would invite people to see what we do and how we contribute to political debate in our country.
I know for me, it's one of the sites that I now check regularly because I find that the articles at the very least are interesting and from a thoughtful, evidence-based perspective.
Fantastic. That's what I like to hear.
Which is, I mean, the show is called The Skeptical Leftist, so evidence-based is pretty important.
Absolutely.
But so I guess where else? Do you have an online presence of your own, or that you want people to find you?
I mean, I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky. I'd be
Okay.
damned if I can remember the handle right now. I think it's at Simon.Enoch or something like that. Yeah. My name's pretty unique. So yeah, you'll be able to find me.
Should be able to look you up.
Yeah.
No, right on. We were gonna do this interview in June, which was a lot closer to when we had the event here in town, and so I guess, are there more of those kinds of events coming up in the future?
I don't know if we have anything planned right now. It's actually our 45th anniversary of the
is that right?
organization. But we primarily, the national office runs out of Ottawa, so I think all the celebrations will be happening there. But certainly, if you visit the website and we have something upcoming, always good to check us out. We do lots of webinars on different issues. So if you sign up for our email listserv, you'll get invites to those. They tend to be very popular. I'm surrounded by extremely smart people, smart colleagues, particularly on the trade file
Right on.
and the tariff stuff. People a hell of a lot smarter than me that can bring some great analysis. So I invite people to check it out because you're going to hear stuff that you just won't hear anywhere else.
Yeah, for sure. And like you say, you're not going to hear it anywhere else. Like
You really won't.
Yeah, for sure. I really enjoyed the event with Nora and Heat, and it was just, or Jeet, it's nice to see that there's other people who are critical of the Canadian state and the Canadian government policies that are sort of, in a lot of ways, undermining our well-being. So
yeah, and I think with the election of Carney, so many people that would consider themselves on the left parked their votes with Carney, hoping that there would be some progressive inkling within his government, and it's looking increasingly like that's not the case.
Yeah.
So it's even more incumbent on us, on the left, to sort of get together and get a program together and advance policies that we think are going to ensure ourselves a better, more prosperous future. Because as it currently stands, I haven't seen much coming from the Carney government, and I guess we'll see with this budget. But at the end of the day, as people on the left, we need our own ideas and our own voice.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for your time, and
I appreciate it, Corey. Thank you.
Have yourself a good one.
You too. Take care.